All right, thanks everybody for joining today. Topic of today is Copilot from Secure Foundations to Smart Productivity. So we're going to kind of walk through what I would consider some of the early stages of Copilot, where you're just kicking the tires, or maybe you've started to get into it a little bit. Kind of our recommended kind of first steps that you go in there, and kind of what comes after that is what we've seen success with other customers. I'm going to be part of the presenting today. My name is Mike Luttenberger. I'm Field CTO that covers all things AI and modern work and data and AI and all that fun stuff. I'll kick it over to Chris.
Yeah, and hi everyone. My name is Chris Clark. I'm a field CTO as well. I'm focused on cybersecurity. Main focus is really across Microsoft Security and Gen AI security as well.
Nice. All right, so this is going to be our agenda. We're going to start with a keynote, just some statistics around AI, and then we're going to kick it off with where to start. And then after that, we're going to dive into Copilot data readiness and Copilot security, talk about kind of the back-end security foundation, things that you should be looking for, things to consider and whatnot. And then we're going to be diving into the data and governance and pitfalls that can happen in the process. So without further ado, let's get into it. I like this slide, right? Because one of the things that this talks about, or what it says to me, right, is AI is not a fad, right? Again, I've heard that from lots of folks that it's a fad, it's going to be gone, it's whatever. It's the fastest technology to hit 100 million users in the history of anything, from personal computers to, as you see here, the internet, Facebook, whatever. And right now, again, if we're just talking ChatGPT, now they're having 800 million weekly users. And again, that number keeps going up. So AI is very much here to stay, definitely not a fad. So this is what is kind of we're seeing, right? Some of these numbers are much higher and some are lower, depending on where the customer is at and depending on use cases and things like that they are attacking with AI. But for every $1 spent that we are seeing a company invest in a Gen AI, they're getting back $3.70 in that for everything that they're running, from use cases, different building of agents, connecting to other systems, but it is bringing productivity through the roof. This is one thing I like to say is AI is not the strategy. I hear that like, I have an AI strategy. No, it's the tool to help you execute that strategy. What is that strategy, right? Is that strategy you're trying to make things more efficient or get information more accurately, right? That's kind of your strategy, what you're trying to the goal of that, right? What you're trying to get. AI is just a tool that helps you get there. Kind of, I'd liken this to, think of if you own a truck, right? And your kind of day to day, your job is to take a bale of hay and go and move it somewhere, right? That truck is not your strategy, right? That's just the tool that you're executing with that. Your truck may come and go, get a new one, get a bigger one, whatever. But at the end of the day, your strategy is moving that bale of hay, how you're doing that, right? And the truck is just helping you. So think of it very similar to that. These are kind of the three, what I would say, pillars of where to start, right? And again, every customer is at a different place. Some are very, very early, where haven't even thought about AI at all, but they really want to get into it, but not sure where to start. Some have kind of scratched that surface of it. Some of them have data in a good spot, some don't. Some have security in a good spot, and some don't. And that's kind of what these three, where we kind of see these three kind of pillars of starting out. So our first one is the AI advisory and impact workshop, right? So what this does is this identifies use cases, and it will get the ROI of those, also exposing the users to the capabilities of AI, right? So part of this is very helpful when customers just don't even know where to start, right? So this will help kind of why, right? Why do we need to get into AI? This helps that with a roadmap. It exposes the users to what the capabilities of Copilot can do, and puts it kind of on that trajectory of that. Also, again, with getting those use cases, users or companies, organizations get an ROI out of that, right? So they understand that if I'm just turning on Copilot, what is it saving me, right? It's very hard to quantify that without some data. And that's what this gives you, is that data that, again, just the example, it could be, we finally use 10 use cases in the HR department or say marketing, that added up to some amount, right, over the course of a month, a year, 3 years. And this helps you kind of with that direction of, well, if we start focusing AI in maybe this department, we're going to instantly see an ROI out of it the day that we kind of enable it, those types of things. The second phase of this, or the second one that might be in line, or again, depending on where you're at, this might be the first one, is data readiness assessment. So again, AI is only good as the data you put in it, right? So if you have stale data or just not the right data, that's a problem, right? So that's what this helps you do, is understand this. What is your data? Is it clean? Is it organized? Is it not organized? Is it tagged? Is it not tagged? Those types of things. Is it stale? That's going to help all of those things so that we can say, yep, you are good to go on this, or no, these are some things that we should fix before we kind of point AI at it, right? And then the third, I'll let Chris kind of jump into.
Yeah, the third aspect here kind of revolves around the next few slides here around data readiness and security combined. So what's interesting with Copilot data readiness is that I've been working real close with Mike on a lot of conversations with clients with these exact issues, right? And what kind of became apparent to me is that I traditionally worked on Microsoft Purview, right, for the last 10 plus years since it was Azure RMS. So the Purview technology labeling has been out there for a fairly long time, but it's not necessarily the first step or answer for everyone, right? Not everyone has adopted Purview and has all files labeled, which might be, one of the solutions around Copilot data readiness that we'll see. But it's more of a SharePoint type of issue that will kind of go into detail here. So that was kind of enlightening and understanding that from a Copilot data readiness perspective, Copilot can find information instantly, right? And it can find sensitive information instantly. And if that information or documents or files are permissioned wrong or kind of hidden by obscurity through, a large set of folders that we thought no one could get to, Copilot can find it instantly. So that's kind of the number one risk area. But in order to address that risk, and Copilot readiness here is to understand, where your data sources are. So, Microsoft 365 is kind of the number one data source for Copilot by default, right? So Copilot is designed to look in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Exchange Online, the Microsoft 365 services. So if you have on-premises file shares or other third-party cloud services, there's potentially ways to understand, how to get them integrated with Copilot as an option. But again, kind of the main initial focus is definitely going to be on Microsoft 365. So again, the enlightening part here is that I have somewhat of a SharePoint background going all the way back to SharePoint on-prem. But again, I've been doing Microsoft Purview for the last 10 plus years. So, I'm thinking I'm going right to Purview controls, but in reality, the problem lies with permissions and SharePoint and the backend services here. So if we're talking about potentially sensitive files that are shared with everyone. So there's an everyone group. There's also an everyone except external users group. And there's what's called organizational links that are essentially a link with a token for redemption. So you can have an organizational link that is shared with everyone in the organization, but only a handful of users might have redeemed it. So there's kind of a gray area, but a way to search for those org links that were shared with large groups. Then there's also anyone links or anonymous links that if anyone has that link, they have access to that file. So what we start to look at is really a concept of overexposed sensitive data based on this Copilot readiness exercise here. So we have various tools in Purview that can help with this. There's data security posture management for AI and specifically data assessments that are available. Even more newer features that were just announced at Ignite recently that should be falling into tenants soon enough here that will really help out with this. There's other third-party tools that we've used, one being AvePoint Insights, and able to find this overexposed sensitive data and understand, what you're up against essentially. So again, as Mike was saying, everyone's kind of in a different position, right? You might have, a handful of files that are overexposed that are considered sensitive data, and you can easily remove those links and remediate it. Or you might have a million files that are on the other side of the spectrum that might take a lot more effort, right, to get ready. So the overexposed sensitive data is really concentrating on those main groups. And then the visibility aspect, there's some other controls with what's called restricted SharePoint search. And then relating back to Purview, there's Copilot DLP. So if we do start labeling sensitive files with a particular sensitivity label, you can then tell Copilot DLP to hide that from the Copilot results. What was also announced at Ignite was being able to use sensitive info types as that condition versus the label. So that will open up a lot of capabilities for people that don't have, or organizations that don't have labeling in place to be able to take advantage of that. So you now be able to use, say, social security number as that condition, and then say hide this document that has social security number from Copilot. So lots of good announcements there, but you can see it's kind of a strategy overall around data readiness, understanding where your data is, how Copilot uses it, and what the potential risk is there, and how to address it. So if we move to the next slide here, the other aspect here is Copilot security. So data readiness is definitely kind of a logical step, right, where you want to make sure that that overexposed data is taken care of, or there's limited Copilot usage potentially in the beginning until that's taken care of or remediated. But then there's also kind of overall security aspects here. So we were mentioning Microsoft Purview as key capability around Copilot. So sensitivity labels are key there, right? So if you have a strategy around data classification with sensitivity labels, Copilot honors the labels, right? So if they have encryption, only users that have those permissions will be able to access the document. Same thing with Copilot. Copilot represents that user accessing the document, so only that encryption applies there as well. Endpoint DLP is another great area to look at overall Gen AI usage, including Copilot usage. There can be very specific DLP policies around Copilot prompts and responses, and then also just preventing data exfil scenarios to potentially other Gen AI apps or other apps outside of Copilot as well. So that's kind of a containment avenue, and one of the tools here in our toolbox for addressing Copilot security. And then insider risk takes a lot of newer indicators around Copilot. And brings those into insider risk capabilities. So being able to take various signals across all different areas, including Copilot, and then determine if there's a risk status for a user to then be used in DLP, other features like conditional access. So it becomes a key part of your Copilot security strategy, including sensitive prompts or malicious actions around Copilot. And then other key areas are communications compliance, also focused on kind of malicious prompts that would feed into insider risk as well. So there's kind of a better together story here you can see with some of the Purview features. And then even Defender for Cloud apps, you can say if you have an initiative to only roll out Copilot, but you want to not quite allow other Gen AI apps, you could block those apps via unsanctioned apps on the endpoints themselves, or you could at least report against those apps in an audit mode and understand what users are using in your environment. So not only Copilot security, but really wraps around these capabilities for overall Gen AI security as well.
So you're saying, quick question. So you're saying if my organization wants to say block like Gemini or something, I can do that here?
Correct.
Awesome.
Yep. So there's 1,000+ Gen AI apps that it's aware of, like Gemini, Claude, Grok, etc. So more get added every day, and essentially that reports down to the endpoints. In Defender for Cloud apps, you can mark any of those apps as unsanctioned, it'll actually block it at the network level.
Very cool.
So some other newer announcements too at Ignite around Agent 365. So this is kind of a new control plane for all AI agents in your tenant, including Copilot. We can see there's a lot of different agent areas, even in Enter ID. There's agent capabilities and visibility in Purview itself, but Agent 365 is ultimately meant to tie all those together in more of a single kind of pane of glass, right? Where you can see Copilot agents developed by users or in studio or outside of that. So kind of that holistic viewpoint. But one of the major changes is kind of how agents are identified overall. They're almost like service accounts or users, if you will, but they essentially have a dedicated identity and Enter ID. And because of that, that allows you to use things like conditional access and even audit that activity. So if you don't, want agents being able to talk to a specific service or gather data from areas in Microsoft 365, conditional access can basically help you control that, whereas they were essentially kind of hidden, if you will. So that is a great direction and control, audit, governance of agents there. And then really, it also allows you to have kind of least privileged access to resources, as I mentioned, and integration with sensitivity labels and role-based access controller RBAC. So.
That's awesome because, I hear that from a lot of customers that they don't necessarily want to go down the agent route just yet, or they say we really want to limit who can create agents because there's only certain, areas we want them to touch or certain, connections they want them to interact with. So we just don't want to turn it on for everybody. So this is really going to help kind of drive that citizen developer kind of citizen build of agents. I think this is great.
Yeah, I'd say definitely two areas, right? Contain that kind of agent sprawl, right, from a governance perspective, but also even just get insight into what's out there if, users have been using Copilot and most likely been playing with agents. So
Awesome.
then you can wrangle it, just like we said. So yeah, definitely a great feature there.
Very cool. Now we're going to talk about some failed pilots. Again, some of you may have seen this stat all over the internet. I know I have. I've seen it on LinkedIn. I've seen it, on all sorts of different blogs that says 95% of AI pilots fail. And this is true, right? A lot of them do, but the reason they fail, and I would say kind of the top, reasons are kind of what we have listed here, right? There's no real measurement of ROI. What are we going to get back for this? We don't want to go ahead and implement either something that's going to cost more than to actually do the thing that we're trying to fix, right? Or that that tool costs more than maybe the human to do it, if you will. So you got to first kind of measure what is the ROI of this and what tool we're going to use, right? So that's something we definitely work with our customers, helping them understand what those things are and get that for them. And then again, the other thing is a use case development for a pilot, right? I lots of times we talk to customers and they're like, we have, dozens of AI pilots out there. I'm like, really? Well, what are they about? What are you doing with them? What are you measuring? And then the answer is generally like, I don't know. I'm not really sure. Like someone just said they wanted to try it, so we just were like, yeah, definitely have to have some sort of kind of roadmap of why we're going to go down this path. You have to have a use case for why we're going to pilot this or whatnot. And then again, the outcome or goal. Again, I hear this lots and lots of we need to use this to create X, right? Whatever that is. But there's no goal of that, right? Okay, so you've created X. Now what are you doing with it, right? Or how does that place into our business, right? Those answers generally don't get answered. Again, no test plan, right? We got to have things to test this against, right? To make sure that was this pilot a success or a failure. And again, having a test plan in place to kind of check those things are super important. And then again, sometimes just lack of AI knowledge. And what I really mean about this is there's lots of times that I meet with customers where they said, oh, well, we have Copilot and we have ChatGPT and we have they named off like 5 of them, I'm like, wow, like, why do you have so many of them? What are you doing, Well, we got ChatGPT because Copilot doesn't make PowerPoints. And it's like, It absolutely does make PowerPoints, like, well, I didn't know that, right? So just some of the lack of AI knowledge around some of these features can end up making you spend more and more money on multiple LLMs when you will find Copilot will do a lion's share of what the business is even asking for around that. So kind of what I said before about, AI is, a tool to help you get to that strategy. This is the same thing, right? Start with the problem, not the solution, right? We're not going to come out and say, we need to get this AI in place. What is the problem you're trying to fix, right? Within there. And then again, kind of going through some of those steps I talked about earlier within the pilot and figuring out what those things are. You have to evaluate these things, right? Make sure, again, we talked about early on, right? Making sure the data is right, right? We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. The important of why that's important around that. Make sure that, that security, of course, is in place. And again, this should all fall in place with that pilot, right? If there is something that you're going to try out, a new LLM or a new agent or whatever, that if you have, rules in place around data and security, that this is still adhering to that, right? Because you don't want to go outside the bounds of that, test it and be like, okay, yeah, this works this way, but then you introduce all these new features and it's not working the way you want it, right? Also to make sure that from an auditing perspective that you're good within that. And again, you have to quantify the ROI, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we going down this path? Why are we going to try this pilot? We have to have something to measure it from. And again, scale of the impact, right? What is this going to change? What is this? Is this going to make life easier? Is this going to add additional 10 steps? Then we probably don't want it. Have all of that. What is the impact of implementing this? Also, what will be the time to implement this, right? Is this something as simple as an agent I could create, today? Or is this something that's going to take much more longer building cycles? And then again, that kind of goes back to, is that part of it, right? Is there time to value with that to building these things out within there? And again, what's the strategic importance? Are we just doing it because it's cool, right? Like I hear lots of times where someone will say, well, we got ChatGPT. And I go, why did you go with ChatGPT? And they'll say, well, I saw a YouTube where it made these really cool videos. I'm like, that is really cool. Do you make videos? No. Well, why was that the selling point, right? So we have to make sure it's important to what the business is trying to do. And then again, we have to prioritize this on technical feasibility, right? Is this even technically possible? Again, these models are changing, as I like to say. Every 3 months we have a cycle. Every 6 months we have a super cycle where almost it's like not the same application anymore, right? It has so many new features that it's not there. So sometimes we have things that are just technically not there with the LLM that we'll have to wait on, right? So that's one of the things that we'll have to see. Is that part of it? Is that going to be there? And then again, what is the business value of once we've solved this problem? What is it? Are we going to save time? Is it less people that have to work on this process? Am I getting more information than I was previously able to get? Again, you have to kind of figure out what that is going to look like. And again, we can obviously help you with that. And then again, what are the resources that have to come in and do this? Are you looking at a third party or someone outside like Netrix to do it? Or is this going to be something internally, right? Or even if it is a third party, do you have resources available to help go through the design process of these things and whatnot? So where's the value? That depends, right? It depends on what you're trying to fix or what you're trying to accomplish here. Again, I would say a big chunk of it is kind of that bluish, call it a blue, looks like a blue, like a teal blue in the back office. We see a lot of that, right? Obviously, just creating presentations, email summaries, all of those types of things. It is. And one of the things I like to say is, don't sleep on something that just because it doesn't seem like it's a lot. And what I mean by that, or, it sounds like some fortune cookie I'm saying, is let's just take something like meeting summaries, right? Let's just say 5 minutes, that it's saving me 5 minutes, right? So, and let's say I have 20 meetings a week, which actually I wish I only had 20 meetings a week, but let's use that for simple math. So if I just take that 5 minutes it's saving me, even though I would argue probably would save a little bit more on an email summary, or meeting summaries, but let's say 20 meetings, 5 minutes every week. Over the course of the year, that's a little over 17 hours. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but now let's take that 17 hours and that same 5 minutes for 20 meetings and do that across, say, 100 employees. Well, now we're over 1,000, 1,700 hours that is saved on one thing that's 5 minutes, right? And there's going to be tons of those 5 minutes, but there's going to be more, right? Where there are things that creating presentations that maybe saves you 4 or 5 hours, right? and there's 20 people that do that, and they do that once a week, right? So that number's even bigger. So you'll have to figure out where to start with these and where you'll have the most impact. Again, when we look at like some of the state and local government ones, we see kind of that up in the top there, the external facing, where we will see maybe putting an agent on a public facing website. That is a very common one we hear a lot of, because the feedback they get from the citizens or folks is, you know what, the search on your site is horrible and I literally can't find anything, right? But if we create an agent and load it up with all of that information, not only is this, you know, a person of the, you know, environment or whatnot, or the city going to go there and ask a question, they're not just going to get a link back to a document. It will actually answer that question for them right there, and then some. So again, you'll have to figure out for you where you're starting out, of where that value is going to lie. And again, I could see all of these at, you know, almost every company, but you're going to have to pick one to start, right? And we generally see kind of that back office is kind of the foundation of that. Again, not to say that every customer goes down that path as their first step, but that is the one that generally gets the biggest bang for the buck. So again, we talked a lot about data and security and all that fun stuff. It's important that these things are right, that they're taken care of, that it's secured right, that it's the right data, because if I'm not putting my company data into AI, it's just generic AI, right? It doesn't know me. It doesn't know the things I've worked on, the emails I have, the customers I have, the people I've talked to, the things that I've done, right? All of that stuff without that. So we want to make sure that we have our data connected to it, but in a safe and secure manner. So, you know, governance, couple different keys. Again, we could probably make a slide, 10 slides about governance, but these are kind of, I would say, kind of the top ones that we want to do, right? Governance isn't new. It has been around forever. Again, very much like Chris, my actually background started with SharePoint back in 1998. It was actually not even SharePoint yet. It was called Digital Dashboard. And back when SharePoint was brand new, I remember always saying governance, governance, governance. So this is not a new thing, right? Governance is not new. We've always should have done it, but a lot of us didn't do it, right? Or we had kind of the security through obscurity, right? I'll put it somewhere that no one will know about. Well, that change, AI changes all of that, right? It really makes sure that we want to have the right things in place. And like I like to say, you have to have the right kind of security on these things, where you have to find what I call the Goldilocks of governance, right? It can't be too restrictive, because then I'm going to find another tool to use. I won't use this. But then it can't be so wide open that now we have like a security problem, right? So you have to kind of find that balance of, it's restrictive, but I'm still able to do things within it. So it's kind of the right balance you want to find. But one of the things is the right access, right? And what I mean by the right access is, do I need access to, as an individual of an organization, do I need access to every single thing, even if it's not like private, like salaries and things like that? And the answer is probably not, right? And kind of the use case I'll go with this, or the kind of the story I'll go along with this is, if I have, let's say that there is a spreadsheet in the finance department, and there's no like secret sauce in there of, you know, company, you know, numbers or anything like that. It's just a spreadsheet on something. But because it's not secret sauce, the finance team just opens that up to every single person, even though I'll probably never open that file ever, right? Well, that's a problem now, because now I have access to that, and now that's part of my model, right? My LLM. So now it's going to be able to reference that when I'm looking for it, and I might not get what I'm looking for, because maybe I'm doing a very specific thing in my day-to-day job, but now I'm asking it about some numbers, and it's pulling this finance document in because I have access to it now, and it's like, well, I don't know, like, where is it getting this from? You know, like this doesn't even make sense for what I'm asking it. So also keep that in mind. Does everybody need access to everything for that? So think of it kind of from making the model mine, right, or yours, or however you want to look at that. That necessary access to things, again, not from a security perspective, but more of a governance, to make sure that I'm getting the right stuff every time I'm asking AI from the get. The other is the right data, right? And what I mean by that is, the right data is, stale data is terrible, right? And this can have a couple implications if that data is stale. Example, let's say that I have a policy document from 2020, right, on something, and let's pretend that we've never kind of purged that document and we just created a new one. Maybe we took like a copy of it and made it 2021 and changed some things in there and did the same thing 2022. You get the idea. We're doing that, right? So now when I go and I ask as an end user AI about a policy, I might get 2025s, I might get 2021. So instantly I have a perception of AI that is very unreliable, right? Because it's bringing me old data. But again, it's only as good as the data you're giving it to, right? And then the other side of that could be another issue, right? Because if I am using AI for my day to day, and let's pretend that we had like a travel policy where the budget for travel was $500 back in 2021, but in 2025 we've changed that to 200, let's say. And I'm a user and I go in, I say, what's our travel budget? Well, it might pull the 2020 or 2021 one where it said 500, and okay, I got it. And I go about my business and I go and I book my flight or whatever, and I come back and I submit my expenses the next month and it gets rejected. I say, why did it get rejected? And HR tells me, well, our policy is $200. I'm like, but I asked AI and it told me it was 500, right? So it's super important to have kind of the cleanliness of your data in there. Another piece of this is policies, right? Policies around AI. You have to give your users kind of the rules of engagement of how do I use AI? What is good to put in AI? What is not good to put in AI? In those things. And something like an AI board or AI governance board helps shape those things, right? Helps get those things in there, helps write policies. And again, this is what I would consider very much a moving target, right? AI is very new to the enterprise, very new to laws. Again, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this stuff on the news where, one state says this about AI that they're going against what the overall, maybe federal level is saying about something, or if you're doing business overseas, they have a whole nother thing going on. Again, very reminiscent of the early days of the cloud before kind of GDPR came in, and then that kind of changed a lot of things. We're there too. So that's where a team like this can help, right? Your AI board or governance board around that of making sure that the policies are there and that when things change in laws or regulations that we can as a business kind of pivot that or make those changes in there and we're ahead of it versus no one knew, no one had no idea this came into play, and now we have an audit and now we failed it because we had no idea that this new AI policy was part of our state or whatever. So it really helps that. The last one is, in my opinion, the most important one, and that is going to be our training, our communications, our user adoption services. And why I say this is important, and again, because this is something I see daily. I've had customers who have had Copilot since day one, 2 years now, and over 2 years now, and some of those users don't know the basics of what that does, right? And I often ask them, like, how did you launch it, right? What training did you do? And sometimes I get we didn't say anything. We just kind of licensed everybody and they stumbled upon it. Or, well, we sent an email out that said whatever, right? Like you got access to Copilot. And what we found with this is a lot of users, if they don't understand how to prompt, is they will just use it as a search. They'll just go in there and again, not to say that it can't do search, it absolutely can, but that's a pretty expensive search, right? So you want to make sure that they're prompting correctly so that it's doing the things that it should be doing for them, that they're getting the most ROI out of it. But also it's going to help with, understanding the tool. Everybody's kind of on the same page with it and, understand how that works and have a communications plan around that so that users know either when new things happen or come out, because again, you want to make sure that users are aware of these new things that come out because you want them to make and use the most of all of the licenses that they have.
Mike, one item on the policies as well is that
Yeah.
you can have the written policies, right? But if you don't have the tools to enforce them, right, they're just written policies there. So what we were going over in the Copilot security aspects would definitely relate to that, right? So having managed endpoints that you can control Gen AI apps, including Copilot on, right, to
Or
actually
even
those
retention
requirements.
policies, right?
Yep.
Retention
Mm-hmm.
policies on our data. So we don't have to worry about that 2021, 22, 23. We can have retention policies on all of that data so that is not a thing. Good
Yep,
point.
definitely. Good
Good
point.
point. So this is kind of the adoption. I don't know what you want to call this, like a map. We'll call it a map, right? Today, a circle map. I don't know. But this is how we like to start with things, right? Is first and foremost, we want to get that use case. And again, whether this is I'm I want to get this new LLM, or I want to build an agent, or I want to do this thing, whatever that thing is. This is kind of the model that we follow. And again, this is not like a one and done, like we did it, okay, we got it. This is something that we'll iteratively do as new features come about or new capabilities come out, that we're going to make sure that we're going to the, in the right spot. And this is a direct kind of link to that 95% of, pilots fail, because I believe that they don't follow kind of this cadence, right? So kind of first and foremost, use cases, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we going to invest in this, building an agent? Why are we going to invest in using this model? Have to have a use case for it, right? We just can't have it because it makes cool videos. We have to have an actual use case of that. And then from there, we're going to basically identify what is the success criteria of this now. So we have the use case. What's our success criteria to say, hey, this is awesome. Then from there, we look at models, right? Or a framework of a foundation. Is it an agent? Is it something else I have to do, right? We need to understand all of that stuff. The next piece is, does it align with our security and compliance, right? Or legal considerations or regulatory considerations, all of that stuff. Will this fit into that? And maybe the answer is no. So boom, we stop right there and we're done, right? We haven't invested all of this time into a pilot just to figure out at the very end that, oh, we can't even do it because it doesn't adhere with our legal. So that's part of it, right? Again, responsible AI considerations. What I mean by this, if there's some rogue AI out there that you don't know much about, or there's not a lot of information about it, maybe you don't want to use that one, right? For obvious reasons, right? You want kind of some back end info on that to say that, oh yeah, they don't use our prompts to train their models or things like that, right? Those are things that you'll want to look at. Then at that point, you have the proof of value, right? So that it's like, okay, that's kind of our decision point. All of these things kind of went in where we're like, okay, yeah, this is kind of checking all of these boxes. We have our success criteria, all of that fun stuff. Now we're able to kind of move forward with that, right? That pilot or whatever it is. So then we kind of go into development or evaluation of this thing from there, and then again we can move on to deployment. Again, I highly recommend that you kind of do a dev test prod idea behind that, and then again you have that business value of this is ROI of it. This is what this is going to save the business that we've implemented this. And then again, then we follow this cycle all over again on the next thing that we're going to do, right? What that develops, either pulling in development teams or agents or other models or whatnot. So following this has been kind of a recipe for success that we have seen with all organizations. And now this kind of brings us back to the beginning, right? This was like one of the first slides of where to start. So we've talked about kind of those three. Like we said, users are at different places. Some have, their data and governance are in a really good spot, so they might start at a different spot. Others, I don't even know what AI is, or I just heard about Copilot, or I just got my license, I'm not sure. There's a spot for them here. Or we want to make sure before we even go down the path of AI or anything that our security is in place and that we have some things locked down or labeled or turned off, or however you want to look at that, from AI, or to help make sure that AI is doing that. Once you've kind of done these three pillars, then again, this is just a sample of four. There are many, many other things that we could get into or go into of kind of outside of this after this. But again, at this point, you can begin kind of rolling out your AI implementation, modernize your data, user adoption. Again, that's something that doesn't really end, in my opinion, because as I said, with the 3-month cycle and 6-month super cycles, it becomes a new product all the time, new capabilities. User adoption is something that's going to be continuous throughout this for a while, for sure. Again, AI advisory services, helping users understand end to end what what our company has to do as AI, from writing policies to what's the right governance to what's the right security, all of those things, to a purview deployment, right? Of those things, of a migration, of getting data into M365. Again, many, many things, agent building, connecting to external data sets. A lot of that can come after this, but these three in the white are what we consider kind of the foundational pillars that kind of the check boxes that have to be met before you go on to anything else within there. Chris, did you have anything else to add to that?
No, I think that's definitely a good summary, right? Like you're really saying, and kind of one of the main points is everyone's at a different kind of starting place, right? And have to kind of adapt and understand where you're at and where the potential gaps are and how to address them. So
Awesome, thanks. All right, now we have Q&A. So we'll look at the chat and we'll see if there is any questions in there and get those answered. All right. See, you got a question there. Okay, so one of the questions that I'm seeing is what types of members should make up an AI or AI governance committee? Great question. Great question. So a couple different answers, or one answer, but a couple different ways this can go about. One of the things is that I see is a mix of leadership and departmental members, right? So I would say like almost like salaried, non-salaried, however, again, your company is kind of done with that. But the idea is kind of have a mix of that because you want it for a few reasons, right? One, leadership, you want them in there because you want them involved because it's going to show that AI is a priority for the company, right, to the users, all that fun stuff. Also, just so that leadership is aware of the direction and changes of AI, because like I said, we have a 3-month cycle, our 6-month super cycle. So that's going to definitely play into that, so they're always aware of what's going on. But again, it's also important to have just departmental folks in there because many times when we kind of work with different companies and different users, the upper management or leadership has no idea what someone in finance does on a day to day. So those things absolutely help, right, by having that, because you're going to get a big mix of, again, different use cases. You're also going to get a mix of different perspectives, also a lot of different things that they have. Another question that always comes up, not that I was asked here, but I will say it because it generally does, is kind of how many folks should be in a committee like this or a board or whatever. I really don't have an opinion on that, um, because I've seen success with large groups. I've seen failures with large groups. I've seen success with small groups. I've seen failures with small groups. It really has to do kind of with company culture on whether that's going to be a big or large endeavor. That's one thing I would say. But one thing I will say, kind of my opinion on that is, if it's just leadership, it generally will fail also. And if it's just departmental representatives, it will also fail. The kind of the secret sauce that I have seen is the mix of leadership and departmental, you know, users. That is non-leadership is what I'm saying basically. That is when I see the best. So that part of it is it's good, right? Those are kind of the mix of things that I see that are uh kind of the whatever, it makes up a great team. It helps on with that piece of it. So that piece is those kind of things in there. Again, like I said, it really doesn't matter how big your company is or how small it is on how many members you have. It's really just works. Again, if you have too much, then there might be, nothing gets solved. If it's too small, you are always can't make decisions. So you have to go outside again. That's where leadership comes in and helps kind of be the point or kind of the final decision maker on some of those things where it's kind of gone to that. So having the mix of that is key, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, it's culture, right, on whether a big or small team will work within that. Um, so yeah, so that's all I had for that question. Chris, did you have anything popped up?
required for the Copilot security features that we went over. So there's kind of a mix of licensing that would be required. A lot of it falls into the M365 E5 realm. So you do have sensitivity labels, right, which was one of the key areas that we were going over in detail, available in the E3 realm, but those are mostly manual labeling capabilities, in which Copilot DLP relies on looking for those labels from that perspective, right? So it take a fair amount of effort to manually label a lot of content. So realistically, a lot of the features fall into the E5 compliance stack, or if you have full M365 E5 licensing. Ultimately, that's insider risk management, that is communications compliance, and Defender for Cloud Apps as well. So some of those key features we went over, also including data security posture management. So
I had a
answer that
question on your
question.
question. Is is so what if I'm an organization that maybe has like E3 or something like that, and I'm maybe afraid to do some of these things. Is there a way to kind of do a pilot without like committing to these labels or any of it? Is there something I can do around that?
Funded workshops. Just have to check, what with us or maybe with your Microsoft rep if you qualify from that perspective. But those also include E5 compliance trials. So as long as you have even a single license or that trial to test with, right? It's not fully compliant from an audit perspective, right? You need to license all your users in the end, but in order to at least kick the tires, you can go that route for sure.
Cool, cool. All right, and I think that was all the questions that we had in there.
Actually,
Are you gonna
sorry.
know?
There's one more question. It says, do you know when some of the new DSPM and Copilot DLP features announced at Ignite are going to be available? I'm wondering the same thing. I've been checking all my various demo tenants and client tenants on a daily basis. They don't seem to be there just yet. I imagine they start to appear in Q1 here, so of next year. So just announced at Ignite. So if they weren't immediately available, that's usually around the time frame I would say or count on. So, but great question there.
Awesome. Think that about does it. Thanks everybody for showing up today, and reach out if you have any questions.